acknowledge that money is a blessing from God. That is the beginning of the conversation of stewardship. Acknowledging that the earth and all that is in it belongs to God. Trouble usually starts when we confuse between the blessing and the blesser. That is when trouble begins. That is when we begin to paint money in bad light. The blesser has blessed you with a blessing called money. Then you decide to elevate the blessing to begin to compete for spaces with the blesser. That is when the words of Jesus Christ, that you can't serve two masters, will begin to manifest in your life. Deuteronomy 8:18 has always reminded us that it is God who gives us power to make wealth. So we must acknowledge that it's a blessing that comes from Him. That's where it starts. Because without that acknowledgement, then we may not be able to follow every other requirement by God on how we relate with these resources. Because first, we have refused to acknowledge that they come from Him. Number 2, embrace work. Laziness and wealth cannot fit in the same sentence. I love the fact that the Bible emphasizes the place of work right from the point of the Garden of Eden onwards to demonstrate that there is nothing in the world of resources, in the world of money, that will come to you for free. Unfortunately, many people pray for financial miracles and expect them to find them in bed, sleeping. There are many people who get very tired. You meet them, they tell you they are tired. They are coming from a prayer and fasting session. They've been in the mountains for long. Now they are done. So now they retire home, sit down, and wait for someone to knock on their door and ask them, need some money? I don't know whether you've had such a knock on your door. Someone just finding out whether you need money. Oh, hawajafika huku? Okay, hata kwetu hawajafika. Those are not my words. Psalm 128 verse 2 part A reminds us that we shall eat the fruit of the labor of our hands. Proverbs 14:23, in all toil is work, there is profit. But mere talk leads only to poverty. That those who are toiling, those who are doing something, those who are putting in effort, profit will come their way. But those who are only talking, they have beautiful plans. They are always threatening us. This idea that I have, when I get to launch it, they've been launching it for 5 years. Look at them very well. They are tending in the direction of poverty because they are only talking. You know, success is a product of effort, not words, not plans. We have to roll our sleeves, get ready to soil our hands for results to begin to happen. We have just acknowledged that it is God who gives us power to make wealth. They would have chosen to tell us that it is God who gives us wealth. But categorically, clearly, God gives us the power to make wealth. So who will be making? Us. He'll be giving us the power, and we will be doing the making. Please, brothers and sisters, find something to do economically. If you do not have it today, don't get tired. Step out there. Search for it. If it's a job you want, be encouraged to apply some more. If that is the line you want to go, be encouraged. If you're thinking about business, then step out there and begin to figure out, what is this business? Business does not start with capital. Business begins from the idea. So sometimes I meet someone who says, Coach, you know, when I get capital, I'll start a business. Then I ask them, what kind of business will you start? And they tell me, you know, the capital will dictate the kind of business I will start. So clearly you are clueless. But now when you have an idea, It is easier even for you to approach someone and say, I have this kind of idea. It looks like this. Someone can even try to understand you and ask you, so what is the capital outlay of this idea that you have? But can you imagine you approach someone and you're telling them, I'm looking for capital. All right? They ask you how much. You know, whichever capital I'll get. For what? Whatever I'll get is what will determine what I will do. Then they dismiss you as a joke. Please be encouraged to step out there. It's the starting point of wealth creation. Finding something that God can bless your hands through. Number 3, plan your expenditure. In the book of Luke 14, especially verse 28 and 30, that's an extract from when Jesus is talking about the cost of discipleship. And Jesus took a moment to remind us that it is not easy to decide to follow him, that there'll be a cost attached to following him. Perhaps to caution us from starting to follow him, then when we realize the cost, we start to backslide. He decides to give a physical example. And he gives us this example of someone who wants to build a house. Some versions call it a tower. And he says, if that person is a good person, is a focused person, the person needs first to sit down, count the cost, to see, I have this amount of money. I want to build a tower, and do some breakdown and see whether that money will be enough before they begin the work, before they begin to spend. That first you must do the planning. Perhaps that is the closest the Bible has come to physically show us about budgeting. The need to budget before we begin to spend our money. He even tells us that if that person fails to do so, they will start the construction. The money will get finished. The house is not finished, and we will laugh at him. I'm sure you've seen those incomplete houses that such people began. Of course, there are many reasons why we have incomplete houses, but one of them could be that we began before we counted the cost. Budgeting should happen before we spend and not the other way around, as I see some of us do. I don't know whether you have arrested yourself. You earned money, salary came, or business payment came. When the money is over is when you have pen and paper. You're trying to wonder, where did my money go? Have you found yourself in that state? And you are serious with pen and paper. You're trying to remember. You know, I got out my first 1,000 and I bought tea, and you write tea 200. And you remember a second item, then your head goes blank. But the money is not there. You scratch your head, you cannot figure out where the money went. That's not even interesting. Interesting is what I hear you say at the end. At least sikutumia vibaya. So haukutumia vibaya, but the money is gone. If this was day 3, you have 27 days before the next amount comes, if you are employed. As you plan your expenditure, remember a reality I like sharing. I have 7 realities of money. One of them says, there is no small money. Please remind your neighbor for me, there is no small money. A lot of us have condemned our incomes as small. And so we've put a mental lock on ourselves. We know words are powerful. So if you have called your income small, there is barely anything you will do with that money, because you have called it small. Remember, you're supposed to get ideas that need to use this money to do great things. But you've told your system that the money is small. Sometimes I imagine in our heads we have committee members who are supposed to give us ideas. They want to give you, but they remind themselves, alisema pesa yake ni ndogo. Wacha tusubiri. When they will tell us the money can do something, we will give them ideas. The thing of calling your money small causes paralysis in your financial system. I speak a lot about retirement. And in those classes, several times people have shed tears when I speak about there is no small money. There are many people who've sat and said they're waiting for big money. Then they meet retirement here. That's when their eyes open. That's why we have what I call the retirement rush. You want to build a house that you ought to have built long time ago within 2 years. You want to do a lot of things in the remaining 2 years. You've been waiting for a lot of money. You don't know how much. Nobody promised you. Nobody told you when that much will come. But you just seated because the current amount, you've called it small. When I say there is no small money, I'm simply telling you to allow your money to start doing for you what it can do for you right now as it is. Do not be ashamed of small beginnings. You may have a very big idea. I was training business people in Kawangware recently, and I was telling them, you might be having a fantastic idea of owning a supermarket, and there was a big supermarket there that I was showing them, that I happened to know the story of how it got to where it is. So there are people here who aspire to have that. Today they have capacity to start a kiosk that will morph into that supermarket some years to come. But they can't see the kiosk, they can't see the supermarket in the kiosk. They have called their money small, so they are waiting for some millions, miraculous millions in future for them to launch that supermarket. And I was lucky in that class, there was a young man who said, yes, if I got a supermarket like this, I would be happy. Then I gave them the story of the supermarket. The supermarket they were admiring today was a culmination of more than 30 years of building from a kiosk that I was lucky to have seen when I was a small boy. As you plan your expenditure, remember to be true to yourself. Do not spend your money for other people. Don't make choices in life because of what others will say, what others will think. What if they know I live in a house like this? What if they know that my children go to this kind of school? You will burn your fingers. Financial progress begins to happen when you start to make unpopular decisions. When you stop following the grain. When you realize that your circumstances are unique. When you realize that God graces us differently. Please, avoid comparison and competition as you plan to spend your money. Be true to yourself. Be your own person. When times become tough, I may recommend that you switch to what I call a bare bones budget. A bare bones budget is a coinage that I came up with using the analogy of meat. When you are sufficiently endowed with money, you afford to eat steak. When you go to the butchery, the butcher person even knows, you have even specified, you like the left side. So when you get there, and the left side is done, they will tell you, sorry boss, nyama yako imeisha. And the rest of the people in the butchery are wondering, ai, mbona unamwambia imeisha na we can see there is meat? Because your steak, the left one, is done. Now when times become tough for you, and you still want a relationship with meat, you will now degrade from steak to regular meat that is spiced with some bones here and there. Right? And the butcher person will be asking you, so do I cut the usual? You tell him, you know, I've realized there is something that comes with some bones that have been missing out. But you know the truth. When it gets tougher than that, you may need to switch to bare bones. Bare bones is now where you still go to the same butchery, but you ask them, na zile mifupa huwa mnakata zinaendanga wapi? You know, I've realized they have a lot of calcium. You and I know you are not chasing after calcium. It is the situation. When the situation pushes you to think bare bones, don't be ashamed. Go bare bones and you owe no one an apology, no explanation. Don't come to the office and start telling people, you know why I've not driven today? My car experienced trouble last night. It is not trouble. You don't have fuel. Be at peace. Pick matatu, go to work, and do you, the world will adjust. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Number 4, you must beware of the trap of debt. You know, debt is here to stay. Debt is not going anywhere. We found it, we will leave it. We may wish that it was not here, but it is here. It is not a new concept. It has been here for many years. I like saying debt is a tool, but just like any other tool, it can be used, it can also be misused and abused. When you misuse and abuse it like I did, then you get trapped in debt. That place is not an interesting place to find yourself. I'm trying to restrict myself. This is one of my pet subjects. But for now, allow me to mention and remind you to avoid unnecessary borrowing. Debt is not a toy. Debt is not free money. Debt comes at a cost. Avoid unnecessary borrowing. As much as it is practically possible, avoid borrowing for consumption. You know, the items we consume are recurrent. If I borrow to buy unga and I'm able to have ugali at lunchtime, in the evening, hunger has come. That means I will need to borrow again, isn't it? For the same. I'm not saying you sleep hungry if you can borrow. But as you borrow, remind yourself that this line of borrowing that I have started is not my portion. Right? It is good that we highlight that. Because the trap of debt is a showstopper, my good friends. I lived in that trap for years. Your life turns upside down. Everything loses meaning in life. No wonder those many suicidal messages that I mentioned. May God help us. Proverbs 22:7 has reminded us constantly that the borrower remains a slave to the lender. You know, when I started learning about money, and when I started trying to see what the Bible says about some of these concepts, I was working so hard to find a place where the Bible says, thou shalt not borrow. Then at the end, I appreciated something that God has given us, the power of choice. We call ourselves his co-creators, isn't it? So he's given us some liberty to choose. And of course, every choice comes with consequences. If you're already trapped in debt as you listen to me, your main focus today should be regaining normalcy. Put all your energy in asking yourself, what can I do to come back to the surface? Because when you're trapped in debt, you are in the negative. A trapped person is worse than a broke person. When the two meet, a trapped person admires a broke person. Guy says, I wish I was just broke and no one is chasing me for their money. Put all your energies in finding out how you can come to the surface. But I must also caution you, those of you that are in the space where you guarantee other people for loans, be careful as you guarantee others for loans. One of the many quotes I give is that when you guarantee, you have borrowed. I speak a lot in the SACCO space, and I keep reminding SACCO members, because that's where we guarantee people, a lot of times blindly. Back in the day when I was still in the bank, I remember I was a delegate for a certain region, and people would be sending forms, nizungushie watu wani guarantee. So people are just signing for people they don't know. Remember, you're borrowing in the process. Please ask difficult questions when you choose to guarantee. How much am I guaranteeing? How much are you borrowing? How many are we? So that if the guy is borrowing 100 and you are 5, you divide, you realize if he defaults, at least 20,000 is needed from me. I'm not comfortable with 20. I can be comfortable with 10. You can tell them, look for more. Wakifika tisa, you can come, I can be the 10th. Find out what they want to do with the money. Make sure the form is completed, especially the amount portion. Some of the cases I deal with in the one-on-one coaching that I do are cases where someone is saying, I only guaranteed for 100,000. Later on, I discovered it was 1 million when they defaulted. Please don't sign those things blindly. Get to know those things. Just do your due diligence. Please, those are not my words. Proverbs 22, 26, 27. Don't promise to be responsible for someone else's debt. Because if you fail to pay, they will even come for your bed. Number 5, avoid wastefulness. Wastefulness is an enemy of financial progress. In some of my other videos that you may have seen, I have said there are people who cook food fit for 16 people, but there are only 4 in their houses. They keep throwing away the remainder as leftovers. But you meet them, they're also crying that times are tough. There are people who have subscribed to internet that can run a company with 100 employees, but there are only 2 in their houses. When you come for one-on-one coaching, I get to ask you, what do you do with your internet? It's only WhatsApp, Facebook, and running the YouTube on your TV. You can actually make do with the smallest package of internet without noticing the difference. They told you it's the fastest. Before you click, it has clicked for you. You got excited. But because you are able to afford, how much is it? 5K, 6K. You started paying. You're wasting capacity. You're wasting the money you are paying for the extra capacity that you're not using. When you earn, please do not eat everything. Remember to retain. I must caution you that we do not save because we have excess. Many of my followers write and tell me, Coach, hey, maze, message you're saving imeingia. But let me just wait. When my income increases a bit that I can have some extra. Most of the savings we do is sacrificial. Because we acknowledge money speaks one language. Save me today, I will save you tomorrow. Many times we've been invited by scripture to emulate the ants that will store food during summer, which they will use during winter. I've heard you say, maisha iko na panda shuka. You know, there is a time you are up here. Things are doing well. There are times when things are down here. How you behaved when you are up here will determine how your life looks like when you're down here. Seasons. But as you save money, I must remind you that no one ever became wealthy through saving only. Saving is a very good starting point, but does not create wealth. It only piles money. And that is where the conversation of growing resources comes in. The guy who was given 1 talent, saved it, kept it for future use. It was found in future. But he was rebuked because he did not grow it. Are we together? So, as you save money, I must remind you that this money needs to be seed. It needs to be sent into the fields to call for more money. That's where investment comes in. Investment is the use of money to attract more money. But as you do it, I must caution you against shortcuts. Do not love shortcuts. Shortcuts in the conversation of wealth creation will burn your fingers. And that's what scammers are trying to sell us. Shortcuts. That's why they come and tell you, instead of waiting for an entire year to get 12% on a certain investment, why don't you give us your money? We triple it in 2 months. And you will find even the learned queuing to put their money so that it can triple in 2 months. That's why financial literacy is a different set of literacy. It is not a factor of how schooled we are. When I was drowning in the trap of debt, I was working in the bank. I was advising customers, but I couldn't remember to advise myself because I did not internalize that literacy. You know, those scams are always working. By the way they work. You know those scams that triple people's money? They always work as long as it is not your money that is in them. When you who is hearing this will put your money in them, that's when they crash. When it is other people sharing with you screenshots of how they've received the money, they are working. But the day you choose to join, that's the day that thing happens. Number 7, connect with God. If we began by acknowledging that God is the owner of all of them, then it pays to begin to draw from Him our wisdom of becoming best stewards of this which He wants us to be stewards over. He's the owner of them all. All silver and gold belong to Him. Please connect with God. I cannot live here before I also encourage you to normalize serving in God's vineyard. To normalize serving God with the same gifts that He has given you to take care on His behalf. This church has a lot of things to do in the kingdom of God that relies on resources that should come from you and I. If the man of God here was to tell you, I have not asked him, but if he was to tell you, because I've interacted with very many men of God, and the church is one of my greatest partners in my ministry, the number of people who visit this office seeking for help that requires finances then you can begin to see how we put him in a tricky situation. And you see, there are those problems people will tell you, and you cannot just tell them, God will do you good. God bless you, go home. There are challenges in life that require a physical solution. Jesus had the power to even tell those people, may you be full, and they would be full when they were hungry. But he chose to physically give them food. There is a situation that will face Pastor Ban here, and he needs to swing his seat and open some drawer and chuck out some unga and give a brother or a sister and tell them, may God do you well. Now that doing well is making sense. May we connect with God. Brothers and sisters, I may not know how your finances are looking like today. I don't know how long you've been waiting upon the Lord for some change in your money story. I don't know. Maybe you don't have income as you listen to me today for whatever reason. Maybe you have income, but you don't seem to know where it goes, like we said. Maybe you're working so hard, but you cannot even enjoy the fruit of the labor of your hands. Maybe you're trapped in debt, just like I was for those many years. Maybe the pressure is so high. Maybe you're on the verge of giving up. I don't know. I don't know a lot of things about your situation. But there is one thing I know, that your situation is not cast in stone. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Your situation is not cast in stone. I invite you today to involve God in your financial situation. Let him give you grace as you go through these challenges. Let him bless the work of your hands. Don't get tired of kneeling, crying to him to give you a visitation. He will do you good. He will do you good. Do not get tired. Involve him in the making of your money. Involve him as you save, as you invest, as you spend, as you budget. Part of the most crucial components of a Christian budget is a component I call God. Let God be seen in your budget as you do it. Psalm 24:16 reminds us that no matter how often righteous people fall, they have chance to rise again. They have chance to rise again. You know, when I was going through my struggles with the trap of debt, it was a very difficult season. If you've dealt with Shylocks, you will understand what I'm talking about. And I had dealt with many of them. Those guys will call you, they will call you names, they will tell you a lot of things that are unprintable. So, days would be very difficult. Sometimes they would threaten my life when they tell you, we'll wait for you in the down here in the evening. They have a way of discovering where you are and where you're working. There are many days I left the office late in the night, not because I was working, but to try and confuse them, so that they think I didn't go to work that day and they would go. There are days I would talk to the askaris down there, that if you see anyone who is looking suspicious, please tell me. You know, security these days, it was not about security. It was about me and my Shylocks. Brothers and sisters, before then, my relationship with God had nothing interesting to write home about. It was during that struggle that I converted our office toilet into my prayer room. There are some things I couldn't find someone to tell. If someone has called and told you they're waiting for you downstairs, and it is not one, and they're not related, each of them has come with their own anger. And I would look around the office and I can't see anyone I can tell that can understand. That's how I found myself going to the toilet, locking the door, closing the seat, kneeling down there and crying to God, just telling him to give me a visitation. Sometimes my prayers were very upside down. There are times I would tell God to bless those people who are chasing me for their money. You know, when your lender has some money, they can forget you a bit, give you some peace. Sometimes I would tell God, bless them first. Wanisahau kidogo as you prepare my miracle. Yes. So if I don't have any other thing to say that is good about that experience, at least I would say it brought me closer home to God. Please allow God to bless the work of your hands. Constantly remind him that you need those blessings. Keep looking up to him until he has mercy on you. Cry unto him ceaselessly. Isaiah 43, especially verse 18 and 19, gives us hope this afternoon. Reminds us not to cling on the things of the past. Maybe your past has been full of struggle financially. Maybe your past has been full of unmet goals financially. We are being reminded this afternoon not to put our focus largely on the things of the past, because God is doing something new. He will make a way for us in the wilderness. He will give us streams of water in the same wilderness. I don't know how dry your situation looks like this afternoon, but at least there is this hope for us that he is doing something already for us. As he blesses you, brothers and sisters, because he will, he surely will. As he restores you, because he will restore you, please remember the 7 tips that we have learned today. Because if you forget them again, you may end up wasting the second blessings when they come. May God's mercy rewrite your financial story.